When I was in junior high school, I was fascinated with a number of things, horses, flying, a bunch of things. But flying was one that I really wanted to do, and I didn't have any way to do it at first because it was expensive. So another fellow in my a friend of mine, Porky, and I decided that we would go out and go to the different airports, and we would get free half-hour introductory flying lessons, which at the time you could do, because right now it'd be rather difficult because everybody would know what you're doing. Back then they didn't. So we bought a stack of logbooks, went to each flying school, got a half hour, got signed off by the instructor. By the time we got through, had almost all the hours that I needed for my license. I went to my father and said, I need $50 to take the written exam for Christmas, and I'll be able to fly you someplace later on. He had no idea I was doing it. So passed the test, did that. Now, that's fine because I have this a private pilot's license, but I couldn't do a whole lot with it, and I wanted to fly, and it was expensive. So another fellow and I came up with the idea that in order to be able to make a little money, we'd fly bodies for funeral homes. Why would you do that? Because nobody else was doing it. And also because it worked, because we had a very small airplane, a Mooney's Super 21.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a stretcher that went on the right-hand side under the rudders and over the back of the seat. And we went to the funeral homes and we talked to them about putting the body right-hand side. We could fly it very quickly anywhere in the country, and could do it almost the same price you did with driving it on the road, but we could get it there one heck of a lot faster. And this gave me an excuse to build time in the airplane and keep the airplane paid for.
Do you know if anyone in the country was doing the same thing that you came up with?
I don't think so.
So you basically
Never saw anybody do it. They certainly weren't here.
Okay.
But the flying to me was fascinating. But we didn't have them in body bags. That's one of the questions I get all the time. Well, how did you do that? The only time they were in a body bag was if they had drowned. This could get a little bit morbid. It morphs into something better later on because I got kind of tired of that having bodies next to it.
But the plane is, the way I see it, I'm not a plane expert by far, but as far as I understand, the plane was very small.
Very small.
So how did you fit in a coffin or?
Couldn't get a coffin in. That came later on another airplane.
So how what was that the body was in?
The body was under a sheet, wrapped in a
On
sheet.
stretchers?
On a stretcher. I would get into the left seat. On the few times when I would find a date who wanted to go on the flight, we would have to get in the right. It'd be up there near the head. The feet were down in the front near in the co-pilot seat. And when we were in the aircraft, the funeral home would come up with their hearse. They would put the body in the stretcher, put the restraints on it, and we'd take off. Whenever we got to whatever airport we were going to, we'd call ahead. The funeral home would come out with a hearse, get the body out, take it on to wherever it needed to go for the funeral, and we would go on to fly somewhere else or come back.
And you were not
I know
impacted by the fact that you had a dead body next to you, probably with a tag on, while flying it from one destination to another?
Well, I didn't like it.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, nobody would.
It paid for the airplane. It made it possible to have to begin a flying career, and then to get into something else. Because what normally happens, I think, in most businesses, at least in my experience, that over time things change and they get better. You find other ways to do things. So the idea then was, well, you asked about a casket. That was really the best idea. That's really what I thought we should do. So,
and the casket would fit in.
This is where it gets screwed up. Okay, best laid plans of mice and men. Okay, the casket, the airplane that I got was a beautiful Beechcraft 36. measured it, but missed it by an inch. It was an inch too short for a regular casket. We could get a military casket. We couldn't get the standard casket. Now I got a problem. I've got this beautiful airplane. It's pretty, that's back then it was not expensive like they are now, but it was, for me, it was very expensive. And I got to pay for it. So you got to be innovative. So I knew a nurse that did emergency room work. So I asked her, well, what do you think about the idea of flying ambulance patients? We're doing that. This is the beginning of the Aerovac system. There were no rules for it. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, didn't even have rules for what you had to have in those days. So then I got with an FAA military fellow and asked him about maybe let's write a manual that we can do, partly to protect myself. I wanted to make sure that nobody could compete exactly the way I was doing it, but also to have some attachment points and safety built in so that we knew what we were doing. And I wanted the research there too, because I wanted to be sure that since we were carrying patients and then ultimately doctors, nurses, that it was safe. Well, that airplane was perfect for that. Beautiful airplane, single engine airplane, but inexpensive to fly. And I could do oil field rescue, a lot of things that weren't being done that way at that time. So in that groove, but then along the way, there's a gorgeous airplane, and I got customers that wanted to fly in it. Started flying customers. Some
Alive.
yeah, entertainers, very, very famous entertainers. But I will say that it worked out beautifully. We did work with movie stars, rock stars. A lot of the people really enjoyed it. The airplane was inexpensive to operate. So anyway, but also the rescue was fun. I would wake up in the middle of the night and get a call. There was someone to pick up in McAllen, Texas. So they might be over in California to bring back because they need to have emergency surgery or whatever. And this was before the extensive work now. And that led into getting the city ambulance service in Dallas. I bought that for transfer. This was the transfer service, and it expanded into a number of different areas.
If I may, let's go back to the dead bodies that you taxied from.
So everybody wants to hear about.
Right, well, of course. I mean, if you're not giving me the name of or the names of
I can't give you the name of dead people.
Well, anyone famous dead that you taxied from one place to another?
We had one very famous family, a Dallas family, that came up with this. They told me that they had a grandmother who was pregnant, and they wanted to have her go to her son who was going to be able to deliver a baby. The lady was 80 years old, so
Pregnant?
That's what they said, and they showed. They came in with an MRI, and they showed what looked like a baby, and I was sure it was we call it a blastula. It's a swelling. So I think it was crazy, but they had letters saying testing, and I had to put a doctor on board. I needed to have a nurse on board. They wanted it for potentially to be able to deliver if that happened. It was weird, and I was sure that it wasn't true, but it was a very, very prominent family here.
And do you know the ending of the story? Did she deliver? Was it a real one, or it was?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay.
I wish I knew the ending of the story.
And
I wanted to buy the story. I told them that if they would let me use the name,
right,
I would go to the bank and borrow any amount of money they wanted so I could tell this story, but it didn't work.
Were people like, when you were taking the buddy, or a buddy rather, from one place to another at the destination, were people kind of, in the beginning, were they puzzled by, were they afraid, were they by the fact that the plane is coming with the dead body on board?
No more than they would be frightened by an ambulance going down the street that's carrying remains to a funeral home. It's the same thing. This is an air hearse. There's no difference for this.
Yeah, but it was the first time that
it was new.
Right.
Yeah, it was new to doing it by air that way. But but it wasn't different than what was
Did
taking
they do
place
any
all the time.
practical jokes related to that, or
Oh, and I go to the funeral directors convention sometimes to do some marketing and make some jokes. Say they gave me a little casket lighter, the flame popped up in the middle. They had and most of the guys that were there had shovels for ties.
oh my god, what was that? What was that? I think you mentioned it when we talked before. You mentioned some kind of a joke that the story about the guy, the dead man rising from.
Oh, that was a joke we pulled on one of the guys at the hangar. Yeah, we had was this one fellow who was like kind of a handy guy in the hangar, and he was always just going around. When you'd have a stretcher sometimes in the hangar, and there would be a body on it, and he was creeping around all the time. And one day we decided we were going to pull a joke on him, and so I wrapped up our the avionics guy, Armin, wrapped him up in a sheet, put him on the stretcher. And the stretcher was right in front of the door where you had to go into the office in order to be able to get the paychecks. And when the guy came by, one of the fellows tapped on the wall, and Armin sits up and goes, and this guy ran through a metal door in the back.
Did he
And
come
didn't
back?
come back. He did not come back.
He didn't come
he never
back to
got
pick up
paycheck.
his check.
Never picked up his paycheck.
So he quit.
He quit.
This poor guy. By the way, when you got your license, did you fly your dad anywhere, or
Mhm.
what happened?
Well, yeah, I flew Dad and all my friends and everybody.
Kenneth, again, thank you very much for the story. It's just fascinating. I never thought that I would talk to a person who actually transported dead bodies from one place to another. It's yeah, I believe it was quite innovative.
One of the things that you commented about is that it was odd, and I get lots of questions about that. And the biggest problem back in those days was having a date to go on those flights because we went to some really fascinating places, but not many of the girls wanted to ride next to the body. Only
Well, yeah,
yeah. So, yeah, that's one of the many reasons for getting the bigger airplanes.